Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Tea Time, the podcast. And on today's episode, we are diving into the topic of when it's time for a rebrand, whether it's time for a refresh, what's the difference between the two, and signs that it's time for a rebrand or a refresh, and which one is the one you should really be looking at this point in time. Let's dive into today's episode where we are speaking about signs that you may need a rebrand, a refresh, or you might even need to refresh your brand by launching a new website or refreshing your current website. And what things do I need to consider that I need to be ready for on my website so that persons can have a seamless customer experience and user experience from the time they touch your brand via social media or they found you in a Google search to deciding to book with you or buy from you. So first things first, what is a rebrand versus a refresh? So a refresh is when you strategically or intentionally take certain elements of your brand and you kind of give it like a facelift. You change things up or you infuse new elements to breathe new life into that brand. A perfect example that many people will be familiar with is like your favorite fast food restaurant that has been around for decades. When you go and let's say you do a quick Google search, you can do that if you're listening to this on the podcast, or you can head on over to YouTube. I may put some visuals up on the screen that would show you like what KFC looked like in like 1980 something, and then their recent refresh. I wouldn't even call it a rebrand, it is more of a refresh in more recent times. You can tell it's still red, it still has like the signature elements to it, but you can tell when it's the old graphics or the old visuals and the old elements that looks a lot more dated, and then you have the newer elements that look a lot more refreshed, modern, fun. They are infusing new elements into their existing ones that have been around for years. So that way you still maintain that nostalgic feel. You do not change up the what makes it identifiable. The logo may be tweaked slightly. It might go from being like really intricate to a more minimalism or simplified version of an existing design, but the actual design of it doesn't change, it's just modified a bit. That is what we would consider a brand refresh. A rebrand is when you change a lot more elements. You can change the complete color palette, or the color palette could remain the same for the most part, but then you introduce other complementary colors. That would still be considered a rebrand. So it has one of the identifying colors that you keep, and then you introduce something new to it's a little bit away. So like a refresh is where you tweak a little bit, but then your rebrand is where you tweak a little bit more than a little, or you tweak a lot. So it's on the complete other end of the spectrum. So you can keep an existing color, like I said, and bring in a new one, or you can change the color palette completely and be like, we're burning down this old branded and we are completely starting afresh. And then it's the color palette to the logo. Sometimes people rebrand or companies rebrand and the name changes completely, kind of like what happened with Twitter, right? So that is the difference between a rebrand versus a refresh. I also wanted to take a pause to actually read a definition from my notes versus what I would have just explained, which is in my own words. So you could have this in your notes as well. A brand refresh is a strategic update to existing brand elements without changing the core identity, right? So that's everything I just said in a nutshell. And also in a nutshell, rebranding is a significant overhaul of the brand identity. Keyword significant overhaul, often involving changes to the messaging, the visuals, and even the positioning, right? So it's a significant overhaul, and it can involve all of these things, or just one of these things, or well, two of these things, right? So now since it's time, you might need a rebrand or a refresh. I honestly believe that most business owners do know when it's time for a rebrand or a refresh. And sometimes it's just because it's not at the forefront of their mind because they're somewhat in denial. Maybe they don't have the budget fit at the time, or maybe they don't have the time for it at the time. And it just feels like so much of a hassle. Because oftentimes, if you do have the budget and it is time, because you are so busy and something just isn't connecting the way that it used to, or it feels like a disconnect to you, the owner, and you feel like you've outgrown it, chances are you don't have the time and it feels like a hassle. But there comes a time where you are going to feel like, you know, when you're wearing clothes and you outgrow them, it's the same way with your brand. You're wearing these clothes and you don't have the time to go shopping, and you keep putting it off, and then a button on the shirt pops and you just can't avoid it anymore because it just no longer fits, and you just feel stifled in that brand and you feel uncomfortable in that branding. That is how you know it's time to make the time to embark on a professional rebranding exercise. When the time comes and you sit with a professional, the professional will actually help you decide how much of it needs to change, shift, and evolve with the actual business, because sometimes a refresh might be all you need, right? And other times it's a complete overhaul. So one of the things you might need to consider is that your target audience has changed. If your target audience, you are still in the same business, still in the same industry, but your target audience has shifted altogether, it's definitely time for a rebrand or a refresh of that brand. So in my case, my target, in one of my episodes, either the one before this or somewhere after, the one where I'm talking about, me aligning to wellness more and these preferred industries alongside wellness brands, is that I'm going to infuse new elements into my brand. So for those of you who have been with me for a while, my brand has always been very clean, classy, a little bit of luxury to it, hence why there would be elements of gold in the brand. So it was mainly black, white, gold. But now, because I am leaning in more and aligning more with wellness, I am infusing all of the earthy tones, because black, white, and gold are actually earthy tones in of themselves. But you will see that I'm infusing a little more greenery, right? You'll see that on my website, you're seeing a lot more like leaves, that is breathing life literally into my brand by having these earthy grounding elements. But at the same time, my overall brand hasn't changed too much, so the visuals don't need to change too much either, but it's really just reflecting your brand from like the inside out. So I'm leaning into these core values and it's shining through on the outside. It's the same thing that's going to happen with your brand. So your target audience might have changed, or you might be leaning into a particular core value. Like in my case, I'm leaning into a core value and I'm leaning into these preferred types of businesses. So there's a positioning change that's happening there, and that is a sign that you may need a rebrand or a refresh. Again, the rebrand and refresh will depend on what you are working with existing. So let's say the industries that you're leaning into, or the target audience that you're leaning into, does not align whatsoever with your existing visuals, then you might want to consider changing the brand completely. Sometimes you may even change the name of the brand, right? And in shifting your visuals, then your messaging will have to adapt. Your messaging will either adapt, evolve, or change completely to be in alignment with the visuals that you are now incorporating into this new brand. A rebrand, on the other hand, versus a refresh becomes really necessary when companies merge. Or let's say you have a business and your sister has a business, or a friend, and you decide to merge the two concepts together and create something new. That's when you want to embark on a branding / rebranding exercise that merges the two companies. And another time when companies consider a rebrand altogether is when they've got negative press, or there's some scandal, and the brand or the company in question has developed a negative reputation to visual, this element, like something happened to tarnish that brand. Then you need a complete reset and a completely new beginning is what these companies are looking for when they decide to rebrand. So earlier I would have mentioned Twitter. It wasn't a merger that took place, but it was a company buyover. And in that case, you would have seen how the new owner came in and changed things completely. And I guess they changed it to reflect their core values. But personally, in my opinion, they didn't need a rebrand. That was just a personal choice. Was it a good choice? Well, I wouldn't get into that here today, but I would say I'm not a fan of it. But anyway, moving on. If you are unsure whether you need a rebrand or a refresh, this is where you go to the professionals to find out. You don't have to embark on a rebranding project with a designer or a brand designer to figure this out. You could actually just consult with one. And this is where the importance of doing a brand audit comes into play. I feel like sometimes brand audits, we hear them, we hear the terms, they show up on our timeline, but we really take it for granted. We quicker want to hear about how to beat the algorithm. But honestly, when you create a brand that truly aligns with your mission, your vision, your values, and who you are here to serve, that beats any algorithm any day because it just pulls in your aligned clients. So oftentimes we might be fussing over the wrong things when really we just needed to take a step back and take a holistic look at our business and our brand. In this case, a brand audit is something you will want to consider if you feel like something no longer aligns, no longer fits, and you just, like I said earlier, you feel like you feel stifled. Something doesn't fit. Something just doesn't feel right anymore. It's time for a brand audit. So here are some common things you can expect in a brand audit. Brand audits can come in many different shapes, forms, sizes. It looks different depending on the service provider. But commonly a brand audit could look like a brief 60 to 90 minute consultation. They can look like brand intensives, where it's a combination of doing a brand audit in the first couple minutes, like again, the first hour to 90 minutes, and then you shift into doing more brand strategy, where the brand strategist, like myself, will develop a brand plan of action. I cannot emphasize enough how important doing these brand audits and brand intensives are before deciding to hire a social media manager, before you decide to do a rebrand, before you decide to get that website done. You gain so much clarity on what are your next steps. That's why it's called a brand plan of action. That's what brand strategy means. Strategy just means a plan of action. Brand strategy is a brand plan of action, right? Now, so those are your options that you could look at. Just booking a 60-minute to 90-minute brand audit that specifically just audits your brand and helps you you figure out certain things. But then an intensive goes a lot deeper, and that typically could run anywhere from 3 hours to 4 hours. That is like a brand and business workshop that's one-on-one with you and the brand strategist. At least that's what mine looks like. So typically in a brand intensive and these audits, we'll go over things like your messaging, your target audience, who do you serve, um, to help figure out if it's a brand refresh or rebrand that you need. We talk about your brand and business journey, what made you start, and we kind of figure things out by figuring out where you've been, where you are now, and where you want to go. And then I will be able to determine what your next steps look like. Is it a rebrand? Is this a refresh, etc.? So I hope that brings a lot of clarity of what a rebrand is versus a refresh, signs you might need one, and what that could possibly look like for your brand and business. And the solution to figuring this out is booking a brand audit. I will include information on how you can book a brand audit with me in the show notes below, because as we head into the months of August and September, you really want to stop and think about strategically where I actually need to put my money. The beauty of these audits and strategy sessions is that it allows you to work smarter and not harder. Those of you who have been around me for a while, you hear me say that often in many different scenarios. That is one of my core values through and through, and everything that I put out there is to help you as a business owner not spend money that you don't need to be spending unnecessarily. Sometimes we get swayed, we see the things on social media, and then we start to think, that might solve my problem, that might solve my problem. But when you sit down with a business coach or a brand strategist and consultant, you get to have a sort of CEO day with somebody else besides a friend or a family member. You get to come out of your own head and you get someone who is neutral to you to really look from the outside in. As business owners, we are often too close to our own businesses, and we have these blind spots. Sometimes not even blind spots, but we have all these ideas and inspiration going around in our head, and we think till we overthink and we wonder, am I making sense? Because that's a question I often get when I sit down with my clients in intensives. They spill out everything as they should, and as I want them to. And I'm just calmly there taking it all in, and my brain is already going as to like, okay, and I'm arranging everything that they are kind of brain dumping out to me. And then they look at me when they're done and say, does that make sense? And I look at them and I'm like, yeah, makes total sense. So here's what you need to do. You're going to move that. So prioritize this, do that. And at the end, they always walk away feeling understood. They feel like, of course, clarity, but they feel like, wow. One, they're validated. Two, they feel like they could do this because now, like, everything that's circulating in your brain now has some structure. And when things have structure, it becomes a lot clearer and it feels a lot more doable. And when things feel doable, you are able to take action. So these are the benefits of doing a brand intensive or just simply starting with a brand audit. It will help you gain direction for the next, half of the year or the next 6 months, regardless of what time of the year that it is. And now you are better able to see clearly, who do I need to delegate? Who do I need to hire for this? If I really need to do a refresh or a rebrand, because I believe that a refresh can always benefit a business, especially right before the holiday season. So you could spruce up your visuals so that when you start with your marketing campaigns and your sales, it's closer down to all of the Black Fridays and all of these things, that everything is looking polished, put together, that you can earn more trust with your buyers, and that also then equates to more business, more conversions, and more sales. All right. So then when you have this clarity, you can really sit down and decide, okay, I'm going to hire this person. I need this. You can start now embarking on booking discovery calls so that you are gathering information on how much this costs, that costs, so that September, October, November doesn't meet you with your pants down where you are scrambling to get everything. You're stressing out some service providers because you're like, wow, you are disorganized. Why did you come now? All my slots are filled. Or even if people have slots available, it's puts undue stress on the service provider. It puts undue stress on you. Things need a particular window of time to be completed, and then when you launch, you need a certain window of time to prime your audience, nurture your audience, and give them time to make informed decisions. So this is my prompt to you, that August is the perfect time to really start embarking on these efforts. Start booking the website audits, the brand audits, the consultations, to really get a handle and develop a plan to be like, okay, I have clarity on what I need. I have the information on what things cost. Now I could go and put things into place so that I can have everything that I need to take action and set myself up for maximum success. All right, so I hope that these tips gave you a lot of food for thought, and if you are considering doing a brand or website audit, I have left all of the details in the show notes below. All right, y'all, that is it for today's episode. I hope this gave you a lot of food for thought. If you gain value from this episode, I'd love to hear back from you. Send me a DM on Instagram. Be sure to check the show notes or the description of this podcast episode for any other resources and links that you may need. And until the next episode, bye.